Hello, welcome to another live Google Hangout on the Living Income Guaranteed. And today we are making a second round, a November roundup for the emergence of new economics. And this will be a show dedicated to looking at all the news worldwide, wherein mentions toward the provision of a guaranteed income in all its various ways and formats is being placed out in the world as solutions, as well as other, let's say, advancements from how we are veering our economy toward a self-supportive system that considers more life, equal rights, and a real consideration of how to improve our current situation from the ongoing crisis that we've all in the world have been subsumed in. So to discuss this with me, we have Jean Kenny, who has just dropped out. So let's see if she is able to come back in. So to remind everyone, this Hangout is being transmitted live. So if you are in the Google event, you can place comments and questions. If you also have other events or news articles, or maybe you attended some kind of congress or lecture wherein they are speaking about the type of topics that we're going to be speaking about here, please send the link as well on the Q&A so that we can add it to our show links. So, Jean from New York, you're back.
Hi.
Welcome to the Hangout, and thanks for being here.
Thank you. This is great. So, we're here to give our monthly update.
Yes, we are trying to make this a bimestral, maybe, a frequent hangout wherein we discuss all the latest updates. So without further ado, we are going to start with very good news from Greece. Greece is going to test the minimum guaranteed income program. So Jean, tell us more about this.
Well, this is good news. I mean, Greece needs all the help it can get. It's in a terrible situation. So the labor minister announced that the country will be testing a minimum guaranteed income measure for Greek citizens living in poverty. This is a means test in that sense that you have to be, I guess, you have to prove your poverty to get the money. The country's current social welfare system, he says, is insufficient and incomplete, but that the minimum guaranteed income is, quote, a pillar of social solidarity for tomorrow. They will receive 200 euros a month, each person, plus additional 100 euro per adult in the household and 50 per children. So Greece's program is designed solely for people with little or no income. And he said that this is a start. It's a minimum, but it's not enough. So I guess the maximum is 200 euros per household, to correct myself. So it's 100 euros per adult in the household, 50 euros per child.
Yes, and it said that it's not the first program that they create, but it's definitely a necessary measure that they have to implement there. As we know, Greece is among the countries that have been most affected by the EU policies. So with that, we go to New Zealand and an interesting proposal by the Labour Party, and it's beginning as a consideration, and here we have to make a point here that next week we will be having a hangout with a person from New Zealand with another political party proposal, but he will be able to explain to us how it is that New Zealanders are already maybe getting some kind of citizens' dividend. So, Jean, can you tell us a little bit more about this?
The new Labour leader, Andrew Little, intimated that he wants to put forward a universal basic income as part of his policy agenda. So he has said, and this is where we're going to get more information, that there is a basic universal income for most New Zealanders, but it's not guaranteed. It's guaranteed, well, anyway, the details of it are going to be explained, but his proposal is that $9,000 be given to every New Zealander. And this will expand on what is already existing, which will be more fully explained later, which is called in New Zealand Inc., which is a dividend that the country provides for people making over $70,000, according to the article. So the details of this will be explained, but suffice to say that this is a new policy for everyone where $9,000 is suggested will be given as a basic guaranteed income. So we'll follow up on that, but that's a recent development.
Yes, what's important to place in here is that it is a political agenda, which is precisely what we agree with and what the point is with the living income guaranteed proposal, that it becomes part of a political party's proposal so that people can actually vote on it. And so this places basic income, UBI, or any other name for it in the greater scope of solutions, which is great.
It's true. It's true. It's good to step back and look at it from that philosophical point of view, that whether you're calling it basic income, guaranteed income, living income, it's all the same thing. It's a guaranteed basis of a starting point so that everyone has a decent standard of living.
Exactly. So let's move on to their third point, which is a very good news for South Africa, and that comes directly from ourselves as a living income movement. We have a living income proposal for South Africa. So this has been written by Leila Zamora Moreno and Maite Zamora Moreno in South Africa. So it's essentially the living income proposal, but directly specialized on being applied in South Africa, which is where they're currently living in. So tell us a little bit more about this, Jean.
This proposal is very thorough and worth everyone's investigation. And it comes out of, as Marlen just said, the Equal Life Foundation, this is the first specific proposal for a country that has been written. And in this proposal, there are certain assumptions and arguments that are put forth. And that is that one of them is that South Africa, they say, may have liberated itself from overt colonial rule, but economically, it remains a neo-colonial economic model. So the economic model, the engine of the country hasn't really changed. In 2000, for instance, 44% of the population of South Africa used candles as a source of lighting. In 2007, that's only been depreciated it's only to 42%. So it's a very meager change. In 2001, 22% had no toilet facilities. In 2007, 14% still has no toilet facilities in their home. So the traditional argument is put forth that expanding the economy would automatically increase the well-being. The economy of South Africa has been growing, but there's no observable trickle-down effect, which is consistent with many Western capitalist countries. The GDP is therefore not an appropriate indicator for the performance or the state of the economy. And so what's interesting about this is that they are challenging the idea that the GDP be used as a measure of wellness and well-being for a population. So what must be looked at are specific items, how people are actually living rather than just the GDP. The assessment of economics has to be based on the quality of life rather than just the GDP to get an accurate picture. The Equal Life proposal for South Africa includes a basic minimum income, and this will allow every citizen to have this adequate income purchasing power to secure basic human rights as a starting point for real national growth and well-being.
Yes, and also the emphasis here is to understand how our starting point from the proposal of the living income is precisely human rights, being able to guarantee these basic necessities that, as Jean was saying, they're completely not guaranteed, not a given in South Africa at the moment and many other places in this world. So that's like really getting each other to that equalizing of the playing field in a dignified manner so that these basic aspect of how we would all like to live in is actually given and that made the focus of the economy at the same time, which is not a consideration at the moment. So we will leave a link to read the whole document, of course, in the show notes. And let's move on to our next story, which is actually about Spain. And we have had a very good news and development with the party Podemos, who is liderated by Pablo Iglesias, and he has been like the spokesperson for a movement that is actually quite well ingrained within the society at the moment, and you can say it's the most popular party at the moment, and that is what is relevant, and it's something that matters to us because he actually proposes the provision of a basic income, or renta básica in Spanish, and he is essentially someone that is also having a background with having worked, for example, with Hugo Chavez in Venezuela. There's some misunderstanding on that, and I've cross-referenced information, and it's simply a way to discredit this power that this movement and this political party is having, which actually emerges from all the protests that took place from around 2011, similar to the Occupy movement, the Indignados movement, and I've been really glad to read about this development because it's really a step forward and a development from the protest movement to a political real institution, and that it's actually now having a good response in Spain at the same time. And it was created January 2014, and it already has over 1 million citizens that have voted for them. So this is something that we really have to be keeping an eye on, of course, and we will also be looking at creating a hangout, either in Spanish or maybe translated to English, we will see, but talking with people in Spain that are directly participating in this political party at the same time. So we have to know that Spain, just as a reminder, it has the highest rate of unemployment in the European Union, and it is only behind Greece on the general unemployment. And so it is only 11 months after it was founded, and it is now like the main opposition to the main party in Spain, which has also been like a breakthrough, the bipartisanship that is also existent in Spain. And it is very cool because it is really based on this notion of making everyone participate, which is necessary. And that is something that I suggest also reading the article that we will be placing on the show notes. So
it's amazing how fast things can change. You know, see something like that started in January, you said, of 2014, and already the groundswell in Spain. So once people are aware of the ease with which a living income can be transitioned into the economy, there's an overwhelming support for it, which goes to the American situation where you find that there's support for a living income on all sides of the aisle, conservative, liberal, and libertarian. Progressives, libertarians, and conservatives all, for different reasons, support it, which is an interesting.
Yes, and also the fact that this movement, I mean, he's a university professor, he's only 36 years old, which means that it's like new blood emerging in the political realm, and the fact that it was previously just a disorganized movement, mainly protesting, now it's really galvanizing itself as a real political force, and that's a force to be reckoned with, of course. So let's move on to our next news note here, and this is on Karen Butler's and this Congress, and was it a Congress for women, or can you tell us a little bit more about this, Jean?
Well, this was a Congress that just happened in November. It's called the Women's Congress for Future Generations, and it occurred in Minneapolis, and it's an important development because this is a group of women that have come together, and there are some men, I think, too, but at any rate, it was galvanized by women, and it was to discuss the idea of moving environmental law out of the free market private property law into rights law. And what that would mean would be an idea that rights-based approach to an economy is how, when we look at the economy, is how will we ensure that it will be there and safe for future generations. So how do we protect the commons, the resources, and how do we use law? How do we change our laws to align with the principles that you and I are involved with at the Equal Rights Foundation, which they are with the growing movement, which is the commons movement in the United States and in Europe, which is an ethic which holds that human systems must be aligned to match ecological ones. And I think that this is an important development that will work nicely with a guaranteed income movement, because this is a challenge to capital-driven infinite growth paradigm, right? That there's no stopping, there's no control. And so it's more of a philosophical restructuring, or realigning ourselves with those principles as the basis for our laws and the way we think about the commons and our resources. So it's not directly related to a basic living income, or a living income guarantee, but it is important in terms of our awareness of the connection between the environment and our responsibility to future generations, which includes having a decent life and being able to take care of the land. You can't take care of your land and your resources and your environment if you are constantly looking just to make a living to survive.
Yes, and this is also how the Living Income Guaranteed proposal does not only include the provision of a basic income and providing higher wages, but we actually also integrate these principles of how to first place and ponder the best use of resources, the use of new technologies. We've had various talks on sustainability because that is embedded within the Living Income Guaranteed proposal. So it is really like a new plan for an economy that runs on providing each one the right to live in dignity, but also to make proper use of the resources and to change the way that the economy is currently just founded upon making the most profit, and with that having to face all of the consequential outflows that we're having at the moment. So this is also part of the principles, the ethics that we fully agree with. And I also read that they agree on creating some kind of like a punishment in terms of people that are using, corporations using resources in a detrimental manner, which I would say that from our perspective, it's not to punish them, but rather to create a system that prevents precisely that kind of abuse, and rather propose the fair use, the really logistic development and technological development required to make proper use of the resources and everyone's labor in it at the same time. So,
and it brings forth the awareness too that polluters aren't just polluting their own environment; they're polluting the world environment. So there is that sense of an awareness of more responsibility, and how do you protect the environment of, say, the Gulf of Mexico and Florida. How do you protect those resources to not affect the people of Mexico, for an example? So it's not so much to focus on the levies against them, or carbon tax or things like that. It's more about how do we, like you said, how do we create a new economy that doesn't create those problems to begin with.
Exactly. We focus on the prevention. And so we have a question from Lopert Saba, and he's saying, what do you think about the proposal of Philippe van Parijs, namely the European dividend of €200 for any European citizens paid by the EU budget? And so would you like to answer that?
Well, I have to say that I don't know enough about that proposal to comment on it, but I will have to investigate more. But certainly, that's another discussion: the legitimacy of the EU for the future. So
that is also another aspect. We've had discussions with various people, and I know for a fact that, for example, €800 is not sufficient to live in dignity or in a very comfortable manner in Europe. So €200 seems negligible, I would say.
Right. I prefer this model.
So if we're going to give people money, I mean, that seems like the least and a negligible amount if you really want to support people. So Bella B is answering here, and I'm going to read her reply. My reply to Laversava, the EU should know that €200 is crumbs in the economic context of the EU and doesn't cover even the bare minimum basic requirements for living. I would see such approach as an attempt to have it done with, though it could prove a good first step. I fully agree with Bella, and as I was mentioning, it really seems like crumbs, as she's saying. So if we're going to do this, people, we do really have to understand that creating a guaranteed income, a living income for the people doesn't mean just giving some kind of, your extra money of the month, or else there is sufficient money in the world to do this. So if we're going to vote for it and support any movement that really comes with the idea of a basic income, just make sure that the numbers are right and the principles are there to really support and not just give your leftovers. So that's my perspective. Thank you for your comment, Bella. Then we have another news article. This is a little bit older, but still relevant within the context of the US. The conservative case for guaranteed basic income, and this is published in The Atlantic. Can you tell us more about Noah Gordon's proposal?
Okay. Yeah, this was published back in August, but because it was, they even mentioned it, and we didn't mention it in our last hangout, we're bringing it back up for our attention. So this is a U.S. conservative talking about how it would consolidate benefits and reduce government, which is good. So it's a flexible fund, was his suggestion, that all monies get put in one pot and distributed and not means tested, meaning anyone would be able to benefit from it. And right now he points out in the article that there are 79 different means tested federal agencies. So it's a huge bureaucracy, and so the idea is do away with all of that and just provide a guaranteed basic income, no means test, just give the money. Well, it turns out in this article, it points out that this is not a new idea. Frederick Hayek, conservative economist, endorsed it, as did the famous Charles Murray, famous conservative, and Milton Friedman in 1962, Martin Luther King, not a conservative, but he also endorsed a basic income. Nixon tried to pass a version of Milton Friedman's plan, and basically the idea was to reduce the federal bureaucracy and to create more stability in society. And this was the argument, and they're still putting it forth, and I think it sounds like something that we could work with. Some people argue that it's prescriptive, a technocratic approach. I say let's raise everybody up, and then we can worry about those parts.
Yeah, I haven't really understood why is there such an importance given to whether it's conservatives, libertarians, or progressives, or else in America, when the facts are just placing you within the notice that, hey, the economy is not working, we have to find solutions quick. And we will be also going further into that as we go with other news articles. But here, simply, I would say that the idea of having 79 different means-tested programs is such a waste of bureaucracy and resources, so that can actually be completely funneled down to the provision of a basic income, a living income, with its due considerations, of course, in relation to the states in the US and so forth. But ideologies should not really be an obstacle to start discussing this in a real political manner.
Exactly, and not only will it reduce the 79 different bureaucracies, it'll reduce many other problems associated with poverty, such as police force. Once people have enough money and they're not struggling just to make a basic living income, society itself is much more stable, and bureaucracy in general can be reduced. So there's that.
Yes.
And that we see in that article about Ferguson, right?
Yes, we will get to that article. So first of all, we have the How Universal Basic Income Will Save Us from the Robot Uprising. And this is an interesting article by George B. Dvorsky, and he's a bioethicist and transhumanist and futurist. And this goes in line with something that we've also discussed previously early on in our Hangouts of technological unemployment and how robots will take your job. And as Federico Pistano said, that is okay. So what is the proposal here, Jean?
Okay, so he's of the viewpoint that the robots are coming and they're going to take our jobs, which is probably, not imagination. It's 40% of total. He says 40% of U.S. jobs are at risk of job automation. The part that, and so he said the salvation or the solution to this immediately is to provide a basic income with this new onrush of robotic displacement, and that's good. That's a good thing. If you could argue that maybe that's not the reason why we have unemployment, but the outcome that he's suggesting, which is that people be given this basic income, is we could agree with that. So he said the share of total income earned by the top 1% was less than 10% in the late 1970s and now exceeds 20%. So he says we're entering an era where technology has started to destroy employment faster than it creates it. So I guess I would just say that that I would argue that the reason why we don't have employment is not because of robotics, but because our infrastructure has left our country, in the United States, for example, and in Europe as well. So that it was intentional that the reason why capital is making the kinds of profit that they are is because they offshored so much of the factories and the technology. And it was intentional, and it's not really due to robotics, it's due to a race to the bottom of looking for the cheapest manufacturing and the cheapest labor on an international scale. And so that's the infrastructure that we're left with. And so it's a little bit disingenuous to say that it's just the rise of technology that's causing this disparity and this situation of unemployment. Does that make sense?
Yes, what I would say is that it's both causes, really, because at the same time, the use of these robots replacing humans is obviously, as you were mentioning, coming from the desire to pay the least, to have the least kind of expenses so that the profits can be augmented. But at the same time, yes, humans will have to have some kind of a safety net once that they lose their jobs and no new jobs are created. So that's why we're also calling out for the provision of a living income, but also the creation of new activities that currently might not be profitable, but that are necessary, and that maybe not robots will be won't be the best way to cover those activities, which are mostly related to, for example, education or the restoration of the environment or else, so that we can create new jobs, but not based on mechanical, outdated type of activities that, yes, if robots take over, that's fine, but then we have to ensure that people have this security as part of their living right. What is relevant also that you placed out is that the funding, and he cites these other futurists, Mark Walker, who calls out for 14% of value-added tax, which is one of the sources that we suggest are used for the funding of a living income, just the taxation of every transaction, which would be a much more easier way to get all of this money as public fund instead of income taxation or any other income taxes there that might be just even more detrimental in the long run. So just place a taxation on every transaction, and that will make the whole funding of a living income easier.
And we have the example of the Alaskan dividend, which is based on resource sharing, and so that could also become a source of funding for basic income, for living incomes.
Yes. Absolutely.
And also, I mean, there's evidence that shows once people do have a living income guaranteed, they're more willing to take risks in starting new businesses and creating new jobs. And so we don't have the evidence yet, but we will once we have a living income. We'll see, and local economies actually be able to grow instead of being, centralized with large corporations and maybe offshored. You'll see those businesses coming back to the country and to a local economy. And that's the ultimate goal, is to
Yes,
have,
because
yeah.
right now also the scavenging and the whole falling apart of the cities that used to be like the industrial cribs in the world, like Detroit, for example, it's a good example. So there we see that the problem is obviously that the car manufacturing has been outsourced, mostly to third world countries, Mexico included, for example. And in that, you see an entire city fall apart. So we do have to reinvest locally, and that's why also the living income focuses on, taking care of your nations, your states' well-being, and then look at supporting or helping others. So we have some comments from Bella B. She's saying, infrastructure and real education. A basic income would emancipate the citizen who would seek real education and fulfilling jobs, work contribution using the infrastructure and the market, thus also contributing more. And I believe this is a reply to Benji, who asked, do you guys enjoy your job? And so we also have, which is a very common thing, and we've talked a lot about that, so I will leave a link to a hangout that we made on that subject. So Gabriela Seves placed another comment there. But we are barely through our list, Jean, so how about we move on to the St. Louis article, which is very important, with all the Ferguson situation that has happened, the killing of Michael Brown. It's called What Now? 3 Ways to Tackle Structural Injustice, and I would say also structural violence. What does this article propose?
Well, this article was just written the other day, and the author suggests a basic guaranteed income to ensure all members of the community have a guaranteed income to meet their basic needs as a basic, common sense solution to something like you see in the cities of America, where so many, especially minority youths, are unemployed. And she suggests creating a pilot program in 13 municipalities for 6 months. Participants receive, excuse me, I think I've got my thing mixed up. But at any rate, she suggests that this would be a solution for the inequality that causes poverty, and destabilized community that you have in a place like Ferguson. What was your takeaway on that?
Yeah, I like the fact that it's called the solidarity economy, and that it would be an investment on a local level. So it speaks about worker cooperatives, which is something that we have also discussed a little bit on Hangouts before, co-ops as they're usually called, and other community-based services. So essentially strengthening the community itself and focusing on, as you were mentioning, just guaranteeing that basic income to meet their basic needs, which I also was discussing previously in a podcast during the week, how no one is talking about the inequality aspect of the Ferguson situation, and how none of this would have happened if Michael Brown didn't have to resort to robbing to get stuff, and if everyone was guaranteed their living necessities and had a supportive environment, and the people of the community were helping each other out in a financial manner, then we could have prevented this kind of situation. And also the whole police state and the force and the abuse of it, it's just an outflow of that inequality. I mean, when you have people resorting to crime because they don't have anything to eat, you then look at solutions of, let's give more resources to the police, which doesn't really make sense. We actually focus on, let's rather provide that security and prevent all types of crime that emerge from not giving that guaranteed access to our human rights to live in dignity. So that would be my suggestion as well, and I fully agree with this article, and I'm glad that it's placed out there in the St. Louis newspaper.
And the other, a woman in St. Louis was on RT this morning talking about the climate of fear on the part of the minority community there, the black community, which may not be actually in a minority in Ferguson, and the police. So the fear level just keeps being ramped up, and this kind of constant struggle. You cannot have people living under this kind of pressure without it having come out in all various different ways that are unpredictable. So this is just a massive cauldron of instability, and this is all over the world. And as you say, the money is there. It just has to be relocated, reallocated. Certainly in the United States we have the money. We have enough money to do any number of destructive things on a daily basis. So we're just ramping up fear, and people act erratically. They shoot when they shouldn't. They run when they shouldn't. They say things they shouldn't. And so this is not going to get any better. So
yes,
that's why this is a solution that can immediately address these kinds of inner city problems that are just going to get worse.
Yeah, I would also say that the problem at this moment that is going on around the world, many people are calling it the governmental inefficiency, state of unrest. I mean, it's happening in Mexico, it's happening in Europe, Hong Kong. We see protests around the world, London, and it's really the same systemic problem that we are looking at. Some might call it police abuse, inequality, or governmental abuse. But the problem resides on how we have essentially delegated our right to also govern ourselves to only a few individuals, and instead of becoming angry at them as the perceived culprits, we have to start taking our own responsibility on the ground. And that's why the living income proposal is also fundamentally a political proposal, wherein through direct democracy we can start becoming the directive principle, the directive actors of how we manage our lives in our societies. We have a comment from Bella, and she's saying, great perspectives, I enjoyed this hangout. Thanks, ladies. Thank you for that comment. And we still have a lot to go, so we're going to any other aspects on that you'd like to comment?
Just one thing is that if the living income guaranteed is a political proposal, but in a sense it's apolitical. It's apolitical in the sense that we are not, projecting or positioning ourselves on any kind of spectrum, left, right, conservative. That's why we're going over all these perspectives, because we don't have an agenda. We're not ruled by anybody. We're not infiltrated. This is just a group of people who living income guaranteed, who we are, the people that are watching and writing and involved in this. We're just regular people. So we don't have any great overlord or any great organization that we're just doing it because we see the need, and we realize, especially someone my age who's seen political action, fall on its face over and over again. Why? Because so much of it is, as you say, based on blame, and based on it's them doing it. So we have to step up as individuals, make our lives count, and create the living solution, which is to start that everybody has a decent life. Is that so hard to just give, worldwide, with all the riches that we have in this world, all the commerce, all the incredible resources? So that's just my little side overview, just to give somebody who's just walking in, never heard us before, doesn't know where we're coming from, somebody paying. No, we're just here. We all have regular jobs, lives, whatever. This is just something that we're doing because we're just regular people that have said enough is enough. Let's start with the basics. Every child should have, running water and a basic, decent life. And how do you do that? So we're looking at all proposals. We'll take whatever you've got. Send it.
Yes, that's also what I said at the beginning, that if someone has any other proposal article that we're not mentioning here, just send it, or if you want to come into a hangout, please come and or let us know, and we'll have you here, because we're interested in people gearing towards solutions, and that's what matters. And very necessary clarification that you made there, because we're not left, right, or else. We say we're common sense. We're just human rights guaranteeing proposal, and that's what matters. of course, and the improvement of our current economic models. So let's move on to I would say the last one, because we're running out of time, and we have other articles that if you decide you want to mention still one or the other, that would be great. But this is about the basic income and the world's simplest plan to end poverty, which is a very well written out, and for any basic income starter, this would be the article to read. It's a Vox article. And what can you tell us about it, Jane?
Can you start for me, because I'm unable to find it right now.
Well, in essence, it describes the history of basic income in the U.S. and how it has also, at the very end, you find what we were discussing earlier on about the libertarian proposal or the conservative proposal for basic income. And so you were mentioning that it's a good summary of the left and right situation of the basic income guarantee in the U.S.
Okay, good. Yes. So it suggests that every citizen be given $12,000 at minimum, and that's not enough to to get you a new house, but it'll give you at least the basis of security that you can put food on your table and work at a part-time job and then have enough money to have a decent life. So it would be everybody over the age of 21 receiving a check for $12,000. That would tally up to 179 million people. And it would cost $2.14 trillion. No more food stamps, no more unemployment, and it gets back to the reduction of federal bureaucracy. Government revenue would go up as people would have income that they can pay taxes with. So essentially they're putting the decision of how to spend tax dollars out of the government hand, which is where it is now, and giving it back to the taxpayers. And basically it's a good overview on how this could be easily done. And we just take the money that's currently being used. Right now, $682 billion is being used on defense alone.
Yes.
So we're talking about $2.14 trillion. So there you have it. So really about changing the the will of where we say we want our money to go.
It is really about that, and there are other articles that I will leave a link to in the show notes by Oliver Tonkin. U.S. should enact minimum income, and this is from September 2014. He says that I will vote yes on the minimum wage increase, but we need to be prepared for chronically unemployment, which is something that we were discussing on technological unemployment. So a basic income would be then a solution for this situation. So the arguments are really becoming like a unified voice, which is what is also relevant to speak of. And I'm very quickly going to read Roderick Rodenburg's question or comment here. How can we make governments talk more about a basic income? Because we don't see them doing that in the media. I would, go for it, and then I'll say.
Yeah, I mean, this Oliver Tonkin article that you just brought up was in the Daily Nebraskan. Very, middle America, conservative, very sober individual wrote it. It's not. This is where it has to come from just regular people like ourselves and writers. So it's to just do what we're doing, which is just get it out there, talk about its logic and reasonableness, and talk about the actual cost and how and where it can come from, whether it's from, like in Alaska, where it's coming from resource-based sharing, or whether it comes from taxation, or whether it comes from, cracking the egg of the defense budget. So, but what's happening is one thing that he did say is that the percentage of GDP wages for corporate tax profits, it's at its highest level right now that's ever been. But the percentage of GDP for wages and worker compensation is at its lowest that it's been since 1948. So there's this fundamental acceptance going on, unless we change that paradigm, unless those people at the top suddenly, I don't know how we'll meet that gap unless we as a populace, general populace, address that wage gap as unacceptable, the corporate profit. And that gets back to this offshoring. How did that happen? It's not a robotic. It's not blaming on robotics. It's because the infrastructure was taken out. There was a reason for it. It's because it was unbridled capital, profit-driven. So all these things have to be taken back under our control, and an economy that's based on value rather than profit. It really gets back to a philosophical shift. Wouldn't you agree, Marlen?
Yeah, I would say that in terms of how do you get governments talking about it, the Spain example is the best way that I've seen throughout this development of basic income, because even the proposal or the request of a basic income to the European Commission didn't seem to make as much an impact because it's only a few individuals asking for it, whereas if you integrate it to a political party itself and you empower that political party, it becomes a real democratic movement that people can genuinely vote on and that people can actually participate directly into it. So I would say that the best way it would be to definitely start a political movement, not left, not right, just common sense proposal of let's fund our living income, our basic income, and let's make it work through people's direct participation. And through all of the investigation and education that, as Jean was mentioning, and also our previous hangout with Scott Santens for the US, it's also a great way to start making it part of your daily talks, you know, with people at work, in family. That's the way to start getting the word out, so to speak. And it really will gather the strength that is necessary to get to that point of getting to the ears of governmental levels or political parties once that more people start talking about it as a solution. So that's why we also share these hangouts. And Jean, so thank you, Roderick, for your question and comment here. Great source of discussion. So Jean, for this hangout, we have exceeded our time. So would you like to take any other article? Because we still have quite a few, but we can also leave them in the show notes for people to start looking at them and just study them further. What would you say?
I would just want to go back to that argument where you just talking about grassroots and look at Switzerland as a great example of a referendum brought out by an artist. That's how it started. And it was a people's referendum in Switzerland to bring in the basic income, a very livable basic income in Switzerland. Now, granted, Switzerland is a very wealthy country, but it just shows you the power of an idea. And it can happen in any country if, it's practical, it takes practical work, but it's great to have examples where it's actually been done. It's been shown to be successful, and it's not some pipe dream. So that would be. And as far as the articles go, I think we covered all of the important ones. I would suggest everybody try the proposal for South Africa. I think that's very well written and very comprehensive and specific to South Africa. And I think that's really how it has to be. I would say, as an overview, we do have to think specifically to each culture and keep it culturally based and keep it locally based. I don't think that one large organization is going to solve this, and I think that's a wrong way of doing it. Because I think it's every location and every people are so unique. The way that it will work is dependent on where on the planet one lives.
Yes, that's a great clarification also on the living income proposal, the general one. It is a basic platform that can be tailored according to each country's necessities and culture and people and resources and everything else. So the plan is, of course, to be implementing these kind of proposals on a country and national level mostly. So that is also why if someone is interested in studying the living income proposal and how to implement it in their country, we can definitely assist you with maybe some kind of assessment of the principles and values that the living income proposal proposal is founded upon, but we are surely here also saying that no one owns the right to it. It's simply a proposal that can be expanded, worked on at a community level as well. So thank you for the comments. Thank you, Roderick. He's saying, thank you both ladies, great hearing and watching. Thank you for watching as well. Adele Marie is saying, in the US, it seems the Republicans are stopping most proposals to help the majority. Would you say we need fair elections? What would you say on that, Jean?
That's another discussion, I think. Election fairness in this country right now is debatable. So, of course, we would welcome fairness, and whether or not we can have it right as the way that the voting system is set up, I don't know. So there is that problem, but that's another. There's a way to work around that too, and to make sure that every vote is counted, right?
I would even go, and I'm not American per se, but I'm fairly aware of the political system there, and just as what happened in Spain, Podemos broke the bipartisanship, which is similar to what goes on here in Mexico and in the US and everywhere else. So that political empowerment, and I've said this before, but people from Occupy, for example, and other various movements that are focusing on the ground placement of resource-based economies and so forth, if you unite all of these people into one political movement, you get the majority of America. I'm sure about that, and if you make of basic income the main proposal for it, then people will agree with it. I'm sure that if the right arguments and the right people are into it, that are already moving forward toward a change in America, it can be done, and it can be the majority. So this is what I would suggest, of course.
Sounds good.
Great. So we're going to wrap up this hangout. Thanks a lot, Jean, for all the plethora of articles. There's going to be more that we didn't get to, but please check them out because they're all relevant in terms of what we have been talking about throughout these hangouts. And we will have Jean later on, maybe in 2 months maybe, with more world updates, because it's really important to keep track on how what we are proposing is not just an isolated pipe dream, as we were mentioning, but it is really happening, and we have to echo out these voices. Yeah. Thanks a lot for watching. Thank you, Jean.
Everybody. Bye.
See you next time at the same time next Sunday. Bye-bye.
Bye.